Okay. Oops. This. Bruce, can you help me with this, please? I need to get, I'm hearing myself again.
I don't think you did.
Maybe it's the volume thing. Okay. All right. Excuse me, everyone. I got to clear my throat. Can you tell me if you can hear me? Just I want to be sure that you can hear me. Let me check and see. Okay, thanks so much. All right. We're getting ready here. I see lots of people on here. So great to see you. It's going by fast. From New York, from Charleston, from Santa Fe. Great. Bruce used to live there. See, so happy to be here. Margaret, Eugenia from Argentina, Leah from Belgium, Janet, Stephanie. All right. Elizabeth says loud and clear. Fantastic. All right. Great to see you all here. Good morning, Mary. Hey, Janice from Toronto. Janet from BC, Canada. All right, just kind of glancing here. I see Dawn in here. Hey, Dawn, great to see you. Denise, fantastic. Susan from Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, great to see you, Susan. Lake Placid, New York. Wow. All right. Namaste to all, and Hati. Great to hear from you all. Jewel in New York. Fantastic, thanks, Jewel. And I see someone, who is it? Joan from Sebastopol, Northern California, not too far from Santa Cruz, where we are here. All right, so it is the top of the hour here. 10 o'clock on the West Coast. I don't know what time it is where you are, but welcome. Welcome back. And as you know, I'm Dr. Nancy Hillis, and we are in this workshop, the From Know to Flow workshop, creating abstract paintings that wow you. And thank you so much for being here. Great to see you all. I'm the founder of the Studio Journey Masterclass, the Artist Journey, and the author of 2 best-selling books. I think you've seen them. The Artist Journey and The Adjacent Possible. So anyway, thanks so much for being here. And welcome to session 3 of our program, the Know to Flow workshop. This is about helping you to be able to create abstract paintings that wow you. And so what I'm going to do in this session is outline for you a path for creating abstract paintings that wow you. And how are we going to do that? Well, we'll see. We'll see what we're going to do today. So if you've ever been confused about the process of building an abstract painting, and you want to create paintings that are massively exciting to you, but you're not quite sure how to do that, and you're kind of like, I kind of know, but maybe not really, and you're kind of confused perhaps, and you wonder what goes into creating an exciting abstract painting, because ultimately that's what we want to do. We want to create something that surprises us, that wows us, that excites us, that expresses whatever's coming through us. And if that's what you want, I think this session will be really powerful for you. And, you know, whether you're at the beginning of creating abstract paintings, maybe you're coming from representational art, or you're a seasoned artist and you've been at this for 10, 15, 30 years or more. You've been around here and you're still grappling with this. Well, I think you'll discover why abstract painters like you and me can create art that we love. And this is entirely possible. And, you know, that's really what we want. We want art that excites us, that unfolds continually, okay, that's not predictable, and it's surprising. And we also want to talk about why it's critical to focus on this now, right? Because time is brief. It's been said that it's later than you think. And so this is it. We got to make it count. And, you know, we need to make it count now. So this is the time for your art, and it's the time to say yes. You've said yes to being here, and you continually say yes, right? And that's what we're about. So let's recap what we've covered so far. Okay, what we've talked about so far is we've talked about, first of all, the massive importance of the inner landscape, your psychology, because your psychology affects everything in your art and life. And it's so powerful and so important. And it's the thing that comes up a lot of times when we run into challenges, because what we're doing here is challenging, continually going to that edge. And it takes a lot to move past fear and resistance that emerges. And it emerges in that life cycle of being an artist. And so I think it's really important to continually be aware of this, of your inner landscape, of your inner narrative, of your inner journey, and how you're talking to yourself as you're approaching your canvas. And because you see, we got to allow ourselves to continually go to places that scare us in our art, taking big risks, okay? Because that's where the juice is. And so we've been talking about that and how this inner journey, your psychology, threads through everything in your art and in your life, okay? Because as artists, we're continually searching as we create. We don't know what's going to happen, that's where the excitement is, okay? So we've got to be able to believe in ourselves enough, to trust ourselves enough to go there and take those big risks, okay? And so then what we talked about is the ICE methodology, ISEE. You see it up here. And so if you remember, you know, again, we've been talking about the inner journey. And on day one, and Bruce is going to sit right here, he's going to join us in a minute. We talked about starting and the importance of starts, the power of starts, right? Because in a way, starting is kind of everything. If you don't start, nothing's happening. If you don't start on that canvas, nothing happens. If you don't step into that studio, it's not happening. You know, if you don't step into that pool, it's not happening. So we got to start and get excited about starts. 0 to 1, remember, from nothing to something is the biggest movement, and the infinity of possibilities between 0 and 1. I mean, that is mind-boggling. Okay, so that paradox, and lots of starts, miles of canvas. And that's going to open up creative channels for you, okay? Then we moved into the second action is experiment. And that's what we were about yesterday. We were talking about experiments, and we want to experiment as we go, as we move into starts. And, you know, and again, you may not want to move into that start. You may have already experimented, and that's it. And then, you know, maybe you do want to move into some start. So maybe you leave some raw, maybe you move in further. Whatever you're doing, you want to be experimenting. You want to not know what's going to happen. So you want to be asking, what if? And noticing your creative impulses. What if I try this? What if I try that? Right? And so that was really exciting yesterday, where we looked at the video clip from the blue painting, and then we got in there with some russet essentially and played around with some inks yesterday and just see what happens, right? And so one of the reasons why we started going into experimentation is that there can be a tendency in the beginning as we start creating art to look out there for the answers and to emulate other artists. And perhaps that's okay for a while, but ultimately it's rather deadening. And we want to get to whatever is trying to come through us. So, and I believe that a big part of that is really going into experimentation. And part of that is allowing strange things to emerge, ugly paintings, one of my favorite things to emerge, because that's often the nascent embryonic form of something new trying to come through. And that's so valuable. And that in the painting that you are uncomfortable with and maybe you feel is ugly right now might be very exciting to you down the road in a few months, even a few years, maybe even a few days. And maybe you even love that ugly painting right now, which is fantastic. So anyway, it's a huge thing to be able to not only tolerate the ugly, but also embrace it and really go there. Because ultimately we want to get at our own gestural expression, and we want to be surprised by what emerges, and we want to allow our own lexicon and signature to come through. And that is about getting in there and experimenting and seeing what happens. Okay. So today we're going to build on all that, all this work we've been doing together already. And we're going to talk about a path to helping you to keep going, to create these paintings that wow you on an ongoing basis. Okay, because this can be challenging over time if you've been painting for a long time. So hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have some clarity about this and some awareness of these kind of cycles of creation that happen as artists over time. And you'll see how these cycles fit together, because that's what we're really about. And we want to get at seeing big overarching concepts and patterns and being aware and bringing that into our work, into our art, and not knowing ahead of time what's going to happen. So what I'm going to share with you today is the third part of the IC methodology. And I'm going to have Dr. Bruce Sawhill come and tell us what that is.
Good morning, good afternoon. I just work here.
Bruce. Okay, let's come around.
Let's see.
Because
I have a plan here.
oh.
Let's see.
All right. Wow, that's interesting.
And it's not by accident that it crosses over part of experiment.
Oh, that's intriguing.
So if you can't tell, this word is evolve, written in a circle.
Yes. It's a continual circle, isn't it? A spiral, continually evolving, and we're continually learning. Because this is about evolving your art. Okay, this is where we want to go today. Okay, it's moving past not only emulating others, but moving past emulating yourself. And this is a big one. Okay, because you see, one of the risks as you go along as an artist and you get in there and you start experimenting and you're on fire with experimentation. And you're just going wild and you're so excited and you love it. You love what you're creating and people are loving it. And you have this solo exhibition and you sell out all your works and everything's just going like gangbusters. But the problem is, and the danger is, and the risk is that you might start getting scared. And Bruce and I call this a success disaster. And so what can happen is massive pressure to keep winning, to keep, creating these paintings that are wowing you and wowing everybody else, right? And so the risk here is the tendency to emulate yourself. Okay. And I definitely ran into that. I've run into that. And I'm sure many of you have. I've certainly been on calls with a number of artists who have called me who are well known, and just, then they hit that wall where it feels so scary because there's so much pressure to keep performing. And you see this too in actors. We've talked about that before, like Sean Connery and, is it Larry Niven? Nimoy?
Leonard Nimoy.
Sorry, Leonard Nimoy, and it's like Spock, where you get kind of pigeonholed into this success. And it might be these kinds of paintings you've been doing, or, it might be these portraits, it might be these abstract paintings, it might be this role that you're in. And then there's a pressure to just keep doing that. And so, and the risk there is that you get into a trap of repetitive, predictable art. And we don't want that. Okay, so it's kind of a tricky thing. But we don't want that. We want to keep evolving as artists. We don't want to be predictable. We want to innovate. We don't want to keep doing the same thing. And what we want is surprise. And we want to continually cultivate surprise. And we want to go somewhere new. And we want to take our audience somewhere new. Okay. So what we're talking about is continually evolving your art. Okay. And not resting on your laurels, essentially. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And it takes confidence. And it takes trusting yourself enough to stand in your own 2 feet and say, no, I'm going here. I'm taking these risks. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to keep evolving. I'm going to allow for the ugly art, whether people like it or not. And really, we want to stay in that playful state. We want to hold this attitude of experimentation and evolving your art. So we've got a lot to cover today. This is a big concept. It's a big topic. It's a big mama concept, I think. And, it's really, how do we keep doing that? How do we create art that excites us, takes us somewhere new, keeps evolving? Okay. Because again, it's hard. Because what can happen is our minds can get in the way. Okay. Our mind can get in the way. And it can be both positive and negative, but there are a lot of paradoxes in creating. We talked about one of the early ones we talked about was the paradox of 0 to 1. And the paradox of from 0 to 1 is in infinity. I mean, that is totally mind-boggling, but that's the kind of thing we're dealing with as artists. And we also realize that within that infinity is an infinity of possibilities. And so we got a lot of decisions to make when you realize the enormity of that. And we have concepts to pull from, big concepts like, value patterns, intuitive composing, color contrast, movement, edges, lost and found edges and lines, shapes, rhythms, and so forth. There's a lot to consider. And it's like there are so many things that we can get hung up and start overthinking and then doubting ourselves. Okay. So, and that can kind of stall us out and freeze us up. So what do we do with this where our mind gets in the way, and we really want to create that exciting art, but we can start to get trapped in self-doubt and overthinking. So one of the ways through this conundrum, I believe, is getting to simplicity and constraint. And, there's a concept, it's like we want to get at what are the few things that make a big difference, in other words, okay? And there's a concept called the Pareto Concept. You may have heard about it. It was described in the late 1800s by an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto. And basically, you probably heard of it. It's called the 80-20 rule, whatever. And it says that 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, okay? And then, 20% of your results come from the other 80%, right? So we want to get to the 20% that create the 80% of the results. We want to get to the few things that make a big difference. We want to cut through complexity and bring it in. So that's why we've been talking about big concepts, so we can, create more with ease rather than getting caught up in the details, okay? Because there's so many things to think about, we can get very caught up in details. And then what happens when you do that is your painting starts to look like you're caught up in details. So what we want to do is simplify things and get at big mama concepts to be able to paint more with ease. And this is why I'm very big at looking at patterns. What are the big patterns that can help us cut through this complexity? And that's when I started to think about and write about this icy methodology. What are these patterns that are, the 20% that are going to take us there? And so that's what we're talking about. The enter and then start, experiment, and evolve. Okay. So again, we want to move past emulating others and then ultimately move past emulating ourselves. And we want to go to that edge. And we want to go to that edge where you've got one foot in the known and the other foot in the unknown, to that edge that takes us someplace new. That's where we want to go. And this brings up a concept that we started to kind of talk about yesterday. And that was where I brought in Bruce and talked about, soccer. And then he talked about, these mathematical discoveries happening before 30, right? We were talking about that. And but Bruce, I think there was something else we were going to talk about there, and somehow we didn't get there. Can you come here and tell us about it? It's a term you've talked about. And can you tell us about it?
Okay. The term is poised instability. So probably all of you at some point or another have sat by a river, a small creek, and watched water flow along. And one of the most mesmerizing things is to look at a rock that's just under the surface of the water. And there is a wave on top of that rock. And if you look at it for a while, it's not staying in the same place. It's moving back and forth, but it's sort of staying roughly where it is because it's structurally created by the rock and the water. So that's an example of poised instability. It's created that way by the rock. Well, poised instability comes up in lots of different contexts, also in evolution. But in terms of artistic creativity, it comes up in the sense that if you just figure out how to do one thing really well and then just keep doing it, art becomes craft. And then you stop being creative. You just churn out the same thing again and again. You've exploited the situation, but you're not bringing in anything new.
Right. It's like you're in a mine and you just take it down to where there's nothing left. You've mined it out.
Yeah. The other thing is to go around, if you're the mining metaphor, if you're going around with a geologist's hammer, walk all over the landscape, tapping on things, but never dig. And so that would be the other extreme. you're not mining it out. You're just surveying and not going deep into anything.
That'd be like grabbing technique after technique after technique, but you're not going deeper than that.
So there's a balance in between. And in ecology, it's called foraging theory, which is you have to decide whether you stay in the meadow that you're in and eat there or go look for greener pastures. And there's a strategy, a balance between those two that gives you the best chance of thriving and surviving. So the same here is that you want to be learning new things, but also digging into them in such a way that they balance.
Well, in a way, what I'm thinking about there is that 1 foot in the known, 1 foot in the unknown. And what we're talking about here is a concept from evolutionary biology.
Another one, the adjacent possible.
Right.
This is a kind of way of thinking about how do you put yourself at this place of poised instability, a sort of most open and creative and fruitful place to be, so that you're not, when you dig to the bottom of a hole and run out of stuff to mine, then there you are at the bottom of a hole. And if you go all over the landscape tapping on rocks, you never get anything. So there has to be a kind of rich place in between. And the adjacent possible is a way of thinking about how do you turn this into a principle in your life.
Yeah, and this is really about going to that edge, right? You got that foot in the known, but you're moving into something else.
So the rock in the stream, back to the original metaphor, that has a way of putting itself at poised instability. It has a rock placed there, which guarantees that this wave is going to be dancing back and forth on top of it. So we want to figure out how to put the rock in the stream of your life so that poised instability becomes a constant part of it.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. All right. I love that, poised instability. And we wrote about that on a blog post. You can find it on our website if you want to learn more about that. So we want to be aware of these overarching concepts to cut through this complexity and confusion. All right. And, wouldn't it be amazing if we kind of held ourselves with ease? And this is what we're getting at with flow, from no to flow. If we could learn these concepts and then let it go, right? And see what happens. And so anyway, but it's not easy. It can be a struggle, even as we're trying to do that with ease. And, some paintings we wrestle down, as we talked yesterday about Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. He had to wrestle that one down, and it was a real struggle. And, and then there are paintings that come with ease. Have you had that experience where it just seemed to magically just emerge? And at every step of the way, every movement on that painting is all there through composed, which is something, there's a German term, durchkomponiert, through composed. It's all there at every level. And, some paintings are like that. They're kind of those forever paintings that just came through with ease and flow. So that's something we notice and we're thrilled by, but it doesn't happen every time. And hey, the paintings that you wrestle with can be absolutely astonishing. Look at Picasso, what happened for him, it's amazing though, the experiences, the range of experiences when you're creating abstract art. So again, it's like really remembering always the power of the inner journey, that overarching I, saying yes to the search, saying yes to see what happens, and saying yes to risk taking, okay? And allowing yourself to not know what's going to happen, and saying yes to ugly paintings and seeing the value in them, okay? Really embracing them. Saying yes to experimentation, to continually going to the edge, okay? And evolving your work, because that's where the surprise is. So take yourself somewhere new and take the viewer somewhere new. That's what we want. So those are the key actions: start, experiment, and evolve, continually evolving. Remember 0 to 1, lots of starts, fewer finishes, the infinity of possibilities from 0 to 1. And then even when fears show up, going ahead anyway, and realizing that even when the resistances show up, the procrastination shows up and all of that, that there's magic in getting back into your studio and going from 0 to 1. And that gives us tremendous permission. And so it's a huge thing to do. If you think about the power of those starts, if you ever get stuck, if you can just allow yourself to start, put your toe in the water and just begin, getting those hours on that canvas really helps tremendously. The pros paint a lot. Picasso, it said, had over 21,000 paintings, and that was the Museum of Modern Art in New York cited that number, and who knows how many he threw out, we don't know. That's a lot of paintings. I don't know, Bruce could probably, but
We figured it was one a day for 55 years.
one a day for 55 years. Wow. I mean, Bruce does these calculations in his head like that. But by getting in there, we experience and we get to know ourselves and our gestural expression and our lexicon and our language and our signature. It starts coming through. We build confidence as we get in there. Imagine painting every day and seeing what happens with that, seeing what you discover, right? And remember how we talked about you're the one, if we talk about so-called finishes, you're the one who decides where that is and where you stop that painting. And I believe this brings up a rhetorical question, one I love. It's the question of, is a painting ever finished? And I personally believe, I don't think so. I think it's just rather where you decide to stop it as the composer, the artist, and the one who decides. And, we talked about an infinity of possibilities of starts. There's an infinity of possibilities of stopping. So you decide. And that's a big one as an artist, decision, right? Decision. Okay. So here we are, we're going along, we've been starting, we've been experimenting. And then, we move past emulating others by experimentation. We take it further by asking what if, allowing. And you know what? We create some ugly paintings, and sometimes it seems like they're disastrous. But I submit to you that this is where a lot of the juice is. And so get excited when you create something that's uncomfortable. Okay. And this was like yesterday when we saw the clip of that blue painting. I had no idea what was going to happen. And that was very exciting. And then yesterday we got in on the russet painting. And again, you just don't know what's going to happen when you get in there. But take big risks and allow it to unfold. And really what we're talking about here is we're developing a way of approaching ourselves and our canvas, okay, with this attitude of surprise and experimentation, right? So that when that ugly painting rears its ugly head, we actually can start laughing about it and actually be excited. That's where we want to go. So, so we move into this experimentation. The problem is that we can start to freeze up. Okay. And I have a personal story about that. I was painting landscapes for years in this place called the Palo Alto Baylands. I was painting in oils. I started to really create these gorgeous paintings. People love them. I love them. They were impressionistic, lovely colors. And, what started happening to me is I started dreading going out there to paint. Because the more these paintings were coming along and people were loving them and I was loving them, the more I started to feel this internal pressure to keep it up. And the question became, what if I go out there and I lose it? What if that's it? What if it's like a one-trick pony? And you know, what if it just goes and I can't do this anymore? What if I lose the magic, essentially? And so what I started noticing is a tendency within myself to just barely make any changes. So one painting was barely different than the next. Okay. And they started to look predictable. I mean, they were barely different. They were beautiful, but not that different. And it just wasn't exciting. Okay. It wasn't. And so, I mean, they seemed like they were so-called successful paintings, but they were just barely different. So I got to where I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was not excited about painting. And so I think this realization can come up for artists, is that, you're moving along and you're doing great, but, there's a risk of repeating yourself. And that is a deadening place. And so I believe a solution to that problem, that conundrum, that predicament is of emulating yourself, that success disaster, is to evolve. And this is what Bruce was talking about with poised instability and the adjacent possible. It's evolving your art, okay? And what we're really talking about here, again, is the adjacent possible. And Bruce was at the Santa Fe Institute, which is a think tank back in the 90s. He was there for like 12 years. And he and Stuart Kaufman and a number of other scientists started to talk about the adjacent possible in the realm of evolutionary biology, okay? And so what we have done is extrapolated this concept to art. And that is that concept of 1 foot in the known, 1 foot in the unknown. And maybe you're working in a series and you've been, you're doing something. And so that's kind of known, but you want to keep searching and you want to keep going to that edge. And that's that foot in the unknown. You don't know where it's going to go, but you're seeing how it wants to unfold. Okay. And that's the piece about staying open to surprise and creative impulses, noticing those. Something suddenly speaks to you, and it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been in that painting, okay? And it's something that hasn't shown up before, right? So you're in it, so you're in this painting, and you make a move, and that move leads to something else that was not only invisible before, but it didn't exist before. And that's the adjacent possible. It's taking you somewhere new. It's taking you into that edge. Okay. And you are co-creating essentially with the universe, with the canvas, with whatever's going on, okay, around you. And you're going to that edge of poised instability. And Bruce, you can show us that with a, here we go. Let's see if Bruce can show us poised instability.
Poised instability. It's a classic problem in computer science, is to write a computer program that does this, and it's not easy. It's not easy for a human to do it or for a computer program to do it.
Thanks, Bruce. All right, all right. So this is where you allow something new to emerge, because you don't already know what's going to happen. You don't lay a Cartesian grid over it. You don't have a strategy or a plan. It's not all planned out, okay? This is where we want to go, into the unknown. We talk about stepping into the unknown. This is what we're talking about. This is the art and the science of the possible. It's a world of continuous creation. And it's evolving your art. And it happens mostly, I believe, in the context of working in a series. Now, it could come out of nowhere, like a mutation suddenly. But generally, I believe a practice that's really helpful is working in a series. Because this is where something unfolds and is informed by 1 foot in the known, into the unknown. And it's on this path, on this spiral, perhaps. Okay. So you've got this evolving that's happening as you're working in a series, as you're going deeper, and it's going off into these places. And the series itself can evolve into something else, like a new series. Okay. And maybe this series is the beginning. Somewhere in there, there's a mutation into another series. So again, or it might be a standalone mutation that informs you. But whatever it is, it's about evolving and understanding that everything you do matters. Even those quick little sketches you do, even those ugly paintings, it all matters because it's sitting there pregnant with possibility to emerge into something new. And I submit to you that so many things are trying to come through, and oftentimes we don't recognize it. And that's staying tuned into the creative impulse. What was it Winston Churchill said, Bruce? I love this.
He said lots of things.
About,
but he said most people, when they stumble over the truth, pick themselves up and carry on as if nothing had happened.
so we miss things. And it's like the more we can just tune in and notice those creative impulses that come through. And you may think, oh, that's strange, that's weird. Well, go for it. Right? Go for it. Thanks, Bruce. Okay, so behind me, let's get into this, okay? I was wondering, how are we going to teach this about evolving? So here's an idea. Behind me, let's take this down. Bruce, can we take this heavy board? You can take it back, and I need it. We're going to need to get to these. Okay, so behind me are some paintings. Some blue paintings, and I've got more I'm going to bring up. And essentially, I've got a series of blue paintings. And it all started with walking into my studio. And I had ordered a bunch of paints from Golden, during the pandemic, bunch of fluid paints. And I looked at these, just different paints that kind of drew me in. And I looked at these gorgeous colors. And cerulean blue chromium and manganese blue hue. And I saw these sitting on my table. I was like, I want to do something with these. That was the creative impulse. I didn't know what, but that was the creative impulse. And one of the first things that happened with that is, as I looked at those colors, is I thought, well, I've also got all these blue inks, right? Various blue inks. And what if I just poured some ink? And so one of the first things that happened was this painting here. Okay, let me step back a little bit. This one. This is poured inks. And I was just very interested in these blue greens, and some continuous line going in there. Okay. There's some chalk pastels in there. But that was like the beginning. And that actually is the painting on the cover of The Adjacent Possible. Do you see that? Like here, this part here. So I started there. And then I created a lot of starts. Then I moved into these paints here. And I was interested in kind of two constraints. One, these colors. And two, continuous movement or line. And so what happened after that was this painting. Okay, I'm going to bring it in closer so you can see. Okay. And this was a start that stayed around for about 2 years. So not the opaque part, but these movements here, where I was just really interested in the blue and the kind of aqua, kind of transparent movements, okay? And it just lived there, and I didn't know what I was going to do with the start. And one day I went in with some opaque paint. It called me, you know, after this painting, then I pulled up these and started going into them, not knowing what was going to happen, okay? Then I had 2 more. Okay, let's put these up, Bruce. Oh, wow. The clip flew into the water. It flew right into the a slam dunk. I guess you could take that down, Bruce, and then we'll put this up here. Okay. Put that on there. Okay, so these are really ugly. I don't know what's going to happen with these, but basically they're both part of that process of the transparent, you know, blue back behind there, right? We got that going on here. These were starts, and then I went back into them with opaque paint and some flux here, right? And some covering here, and then back in, and so on and so forth. And we'll see what happens with those. I don't know, but you know, that's emerging, right? And then something surprising happened next. Let me take these down. I was not expecting this at all. All right. Bruce, do you want to come in here and help me? All right. Just be ready to, okay. So the next thing that happened was I'm still in the blues. In this series, what emerged was this urge to move into a kind of more minimalist, kind of post-minimalist, actually, because it's got more feeling than a minimalist hard edge painting. But it's really, you know, a few moves. We've still got the blues, we've got lines, but that was a surprise, okay? And then after that, if you take that away, thanks, Bruce. Then it moved off into even more minimalism, post-minimalism, and into the orange, away from the blue. And that might be a mutation. That might be a mutation, because then after that, I kind of went back in to the blues. I'll show you this. In this series, big painting, bigger, about 40 inch by 40 inch. Back to the blues. Still there's that line in there. And I started kind of getting intrigued. One thing that emerged here that was not there before was I was intrigued by the sense of a palette down here. I don't know if you can see that. I think you can. You know how you lay out a palette? That started to kind of emerge, a kind of sense of a palette. And I wasn't sure where that was going, which is great, not knowing. That emerged. again, just working in a series, not knowing what's going to happen. And then the next thing, this is, very recently, this painting emerged, which is again, kind of like, actually I was working with this palette, and here's some of these marks from the palette, and very thick. Some of these are very, very thick marks. So again, we'll see where else this will go. Another part of that, I meant to show you this earlier, in this series were these little pieces that are 12 inches by 12 inches. Again, mostly, translucent, the kind of aqua color. And here, and I have another one, but I gave it to my friend Sandra Felimovicius, and it's for the hunger. It's for the Food Alliance to help people with food insecurity. So, all right, so let's take this down. So that is one series that, emerged, and it came out of just, this is where it started. 2 colors. It can be anything. You can start anywhere. And it's noticing what excites you. What is it that makes the hair on your arms stand up, right? And really allowing that. So then another thing that happened was I got excited with the color red. I started thinking about red, and that I don't often use red. And what if I worked with, a 1-color palette with constraint? And this sits here on my table, this ink. And I thought, and I've got some reds around, but, again, don't tend to work with that too much. And so, some paintings that came out of that, well, an early one that came out of that is this painting. Okay, I did bring in some other colors. There ultimately I did bring in some pale green and some orange and so forth, but it started with the concept of red and various reds, okay? And, again, these were quite a while back, just exploring red. Again, there's some black in there and a little bit of peach, but just playing around with some starts. Here it's red, but there's more black. And I love red and black together. I love that combination. So rich. Okay. And then this happened, which was kind of wild. And again, that sense of almost a palette down there. This one really excited me. Variations on the theme of red, and this is even transparent red oxide, which is, has more of an orangey look, but it's a red. And then and then that emerged into this painting. And so, that blue painting with that palette started to show up, that big painting. So that concept of palette is still playing around, showing up here and there. So I guess that'd be another constraint. But just noticing what emerges and allowing it. And again, and some of this might feel like kind of ugly or whatever, but it's allowing that, because who knows what might show up from that. All right. So that yesterday we looked at the video snippet of the blue painting, and then we looked at the russet painting. We did the russet painting, and so what happened? Something totally surprising happened with the blue painting, and then I looked at that in terms of the orange painting. So this happened a few months ago. So I'm going to bring this blue painting out. So here's the blue painting you saw. We'll just kind of hold it up, Grace. Here's the blue, we don't need to clip it. Here's the blue painting that you saw on that video clip. And, just kind of seeing what was going to happen. Who knows what will happen with this. And a few months ago, when I was moving it around in my studio to bring it in to talk about it, I noticed something that surprised me. So let's show what that surprise is. Let's flip it up. Just, you know. Okay. And this excited me. Okay. I had no idea this was going to happen. The ink was going to soak through the back of the paper. Okay. And not only that, but it's like it made these marks that are so spontaneous. I couldn't go in there and recreate that. You know what I mean? It just excited me. And some things came through and others didn't. And it's got this very unusual kind of texture to it because it's from the back and it's kind of muted and it's kind of almost velvety. And these textures excite me. And it's the kind of thing, you know, here's some marks, right? It's the kind of thing, I don't know if you can see that, yeah, where I might want to just work with this backside. I might want to just, that might be the painting, right? Because I'm actually more excited by this than the front. And that's the kind of creative impulse that I'm talking about here, is noticing things that surprise you, noticing things that you didn't predict or plan or strategize or anything like that. No strategic thinking here. It just happened. And then maybe running with that. So let's take a look at two things I noticed on the russet painting. Let's bring that up, please, from the front. Yeah, so yesterday I decided, okay, yeah, this is part of a series here. We got the blue painting, we got the russet painting, we're playing with these inks here. And something interesting happened on this one in that, let me bring it in. Remember how we were playing with flux on here? Remember how we brought some flux in before working with the ink? Well, let's come in here and see if I can bring the screen in to you. Okay, do you see this? This was really compelling to me. That surprised me. Didn't know that was going to happen. Something about, you know, the ink interacting with the veiling just makes this really interesting movement. So that was a surprise and exciting and just kind of like, huh, that's interesting. Now let's flip it around. Let's see what happened on the back. Again, we just have this really, it's almost like archaic or ancient. It's almost like something ancient on a wall.
Cave drawings, yeah.
Yeah.
Cave paintings.
And again, it's this, I don't know, it's this texture, it's this matted, velvety feel almost from another time. And some of it came through and some of it didn't. And these really interesting lines over here. They're kind of lost and found and broken up and kind of, you know, reticular, lenticular, whatever. Some of this, like these negatives back here. Anyway, just really, really interesting. And again, that might end up being the painting, right? And what I'm saying to you is if you stay open, surprising things will happen and you will see them. You will see the surprises that happen. And these surprises take you somewhere new. And you're taking yourself somewhere new. So anyway, let me keep going with a few more surprises, okay? So I've got this story of my painting board. And Bruce, if you can help me put the board up here, and then maybe you can tell us about, you know, these boards. Let's take these down so it takes a little room off there. Please. Okay. Let's move those out. We're going to bring the painting board in here. Okay, these are heavy. These boards are heavy. Okay. Okay, let's lift it up. Look at it. All right. Let's make sure it's leaned a little bit.
Yeah, that's okay.
All over. Okay. So these boards are heavy boards. They are, what are they, Bruce?
They're furniture, plywood, birch plywood.
Birch plywood. I think they're a half
inch thick.
They're heavy, but I really like the heaviness because then they'll be flat. If you go thinner, it can be a little wobbly. Okay.
3/8 will right at the edge. 10 millimeters is right at the edge.
But this is a story, and I love this story. This is a story of a series, another series. And this has got a lot of components to it. First of all, this series began with a creative impulse by an observation. And that observation was originated with the painting board. Do you see this painting board? And do you see all the lines and marks on this board? And one of the things I noticed on this board was a lot of horizontal lines with different rhythms, with different thicknesses and thinnesses and lengths. And some were continuous and some were broken and some were lost and found lines, but a lot of lateral lines, horizontal lines, with some verticals, yes, okay, and a little bit diagonal here and there, and some tape and different things, a lot of texture on this board. But this was my beginning spark and inspiration to what happened next. So I just got so excited by that board, and I got excited by the idea of horizontal lines. And it was something that I wasn't exploring. I just didn't tend to work with horizontal lines. Horizontal lines tend to confer stability. Horizontal lines can bring up the landscape, right? The horizon line. They tend to confer, calmness and all of that. Okay, so, and they're kind of linear, rectilinear. I wasn't tending to work in that way, but I was so intrigued by that board. I thought, I want to play with that. That's speaking to me. And so I went in and created this painting as a reflection of the board, inspired by the board, informed by the board, and lots of horizontal lines, thick lines, thin lines, lines continuing and then lost, veiled and then picked up again, converging lines that come together, lines that intersect, okay, intersecting lines, lots of intersections, lots of convergence, with some verticals, okay, some verticals, but predominantly horizontal, and some diagonal. We got a diagonal going on there. Diagonals tend to confer excitement, energy. Okay, some tape there. Why is that? Well, because of gravity is working on diagonal lines. It wants to fall down. Okay, they're very exciting lines. Here's a little more. And lots of tape. We got electrical tape going on here. Another thing, I just happened to find that in my studio. Here it is hanging off the edge. Here it is dripping down. Look, see if I can get that, sorry. Hanging out there. It's kind of coming off three-dimensional. Crossing lines, converging, all that. And just lots of excitement, lots of rhythms in there. And really, really enjoyed this. Okay. So that was the first of the series. Come on there. Let's bring this off, Chris. I'm going to bring them off because it's just too hard to see them otherwise. Just probably lay them in there. Okay. And this is the next one again. And started to bring in here, again, we got the horizontal lines going. We got the different rhythms. Some are close, some are further apart, some are shorter, some are longer. You know, we lose it, we find it, we converge. Okay, we come together, all of that. And we got the tape in there. We got some color. We bring in some orange here. This is spray paint, you know, here's some tape. You know, it's just all kinds of things going on here. And just really enjoyed that, seeing where that emerges. Okay, so let's see what's going to happen next. In this series, okay, and then this emerged. It's starting to simplify a little bit. So I'm playing still with these horizontals. Now there's a lot of white horizontals. Okay, not as obvious, a little more subtle. There are black ones too. Okay, but we're starting to bring in more diagonals. This is actually a collage piece. Okay. We're starting to bring in more diagonals. This is electrical tape. Here's a collage piece. We're getting a little more dynamic here. Okay, we got this big diagonal coming across here. We got one coming up here. Okay. And the other thing that happened here is the big movements. Do you see these continuous movement? Okay, continuous movement. Let's see if I can get something here. He was using the Big Momma brush, basically. Continuous movement with the white, and it's threading through. In other words, it's not all just laid on top of that painting. It's threading through with the painting that was already there, where there's lost and found lines. Okay. So it all kind of comes together, and using some veiling in there too. So that emerged. I got to put some juice going on here to the computer. And then before we go to this next one, I want to tell you what happened first. So I'm living with these paintings, and there are some others too, but you know, they're kind of predominantly light value paintings informed by that board, and you know, lots of horizontal lines, and then kind of moving into bringing in some continuous big line going in there, in that dynamic between the two of the curvy linear organic, and the kind of linearity and kind of rectilinear movements of the lines in that dialogue. So I'm walking around looking at this, and for whatever reason, all of a sudden in my mind popped a concept from organic chemistry from so long ago. I guess I was 19 years old.
The late Pleistocene.
The late Pleistocene era. And I loved organic chemistry, and I had the most fabulous professor, Dr. Fry. And one of the things that fascinated me about organic chemistry was these chemical structures. And not only that, but there's something called an enantiomer. And enantiomers it's like a chemical structure, and it's like the mirror image of that chemical structure. Okay, so they're mirror images of one another. I don't know why that popped into my mind, and then it kind of, it made me think too about kind of inversions, which is a little, that's different. It's kind of like a photographic negative, right?
You remember those.
Yeah.
But it's a kind of, it's an enantiomer also, instead of, you have value space. So if you have value from light to dark, you flip it around the middle. So it is kind of an enantiomer, but not in a physical space. Light becomes dark, dark becomes light.
It's like a value
And things in the
space.
middle stay in the middle.
Interesting. Very interesting, Bruce. Wow. You got the brains here with Bruce. You got the physicist and mathematician. So then let me show you what happened. Is what if? So when I had this idea of like the enantiomer and all that, it was like, well, what if we flip this? And it flipped it in the sense of more like an inversion, actually, even though the first idea was an enantiomer. This isn't literally like a chemical enantiomer, as Bruce said, but it's on that path. It's in that family. It's rather an inversion, sorry. But it was like, what if instead of it being, predominantly light value, what if we flipped it to dark value? I saw this black painting and then with white lines. And this is what emerged, informed by those other pieces. And again, I don't think this would have ever happened if it had started with that other, it was just came out of nowhere. And I actually had to run to the hardware store to get a black gesso because I didn't have enough black. I needed to get this paper black. And so we got that, you worked with gesso and then moved in, and I'll bring it in closer so you can see it. So we've got that predominantly, horizontal lines again. We do have some diagonal, we do have some diagonal here, but we got predominantly horizontal, lost and found lines. We've got this very subtle, let me come up here, sorry. Subtle black electrical tape. You can barely see it coming across. Actually, it's coming. Wow, how far is it coming across? It may be coming across the whole thing. It is. It came across the entire painting, but it changes a lot. Here we've got flux. Okay. Let's see if we can show you that. Here we've got flux, that lovely flux, love flux, got some marks coming in there. And another thing that happened was, again, I was very interested in that continuous line with the Big Momma brush and used, Bruce, can you click that in? I don't know if you can see this. This contrast of the kind of glossy paint over the opaque gesso and the kind of movements. There's some movements that are akin to that continuous line. Okay, it's hard to hold this and do that, but you get the idea. And then here, let me show you something else. This is really cool. Again, that flux and what happened there. But that glossy versus matte, that black on black, that both that close proximity of the values when we got a black on black and very subtle shifts. And then we've got that sudden shift to the white and the big expanse, the big difference in the values from extreme dark to extreme light. This was a very, very exciting painting to me and has led to many, black paintings, black on black and so on and so forth. So then let me show you what happened after that. Got so intrigued with this. Version that this happened. What I realized when I was working on that one, what emerged out of that is I want to go black on black. I want to get it really kind of minimalist and really subtle. And so I've got to come in close because it is very, very subtle. Okay. So you can see subtly the black movements, the curvy black movements that are kind of glossy. And I did use some gloss medium for that. I don't tend to. You tend to use like satin. But I was very intrigued by that change in the surface from the matte to the glossy. And then very subtle lines. Okay, some of these are black ink. Some of these were the electrical tape. Yes, there's some verticals coming down, but mostly it's predominantly horizontal. A little bit of subtle white coming through there, and a little bit, I think this is a burgundy, but really, really subtle. So that emerged out of this series. And then it keeps going. Okay. Then I decided to again go in with some big movements. I'm trying to see. I have this kind of squeegee that I used, and I have to see if I have it here nearby. Okay. Oh, okay. So I have the squeegee here. And I decided I wanted to go in again with these big continuous movements. Okay, and this dark, this black painting, and it had, you know, black gesso on the back, and, you know, going in with continuous moves, right? And what happened there that was intriguing to me is the edges on that. There's like, yes, there's all this, yes, there's horizontal movements, okay, as we have in this series. And yes, we've got the continuous lines. And we also have this really interesting thing. These edges, here's a curvy one, you know, here it curves, right? That were made by the squeegee. Here we go again. You know, it's creating this movement. And sometimes it's angular, rather, somewhat angular. Okay. Here we go. See if I can get you on there. And that, you know, that was intriguing. And again, you just don't know what's going to happen. So let's see what happens next. Okay. We're still in this movement, but what was intriguing to me about this one, as we keep exploring this, was this kind of chalkboard-like appearance. In this case, the gesso seemed to be more watered down. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this has a very chalk-like, like you're on an old chalkboard. And again, we've got these edges, really interesting edges, and you know, playing with these lines, right? But it's very, very intrigued. It was more matte. This whole thing was more matte and chalk-like, and these kind of conglomerations. I don't know how that happened. So anyway, very interesting playing with that. And then this is part of this series. This is a larger painting, this big painting. And with this big painting, I started out with the big movements, okay? The big curvy movements with the brush, rhythmic movements, and brought in the horizontal, okay? Brought in the horizontal. And these, I believe, are lots of like ink movements and, you know, different rhythms of the movement, okay? Different links and so on and so forth, and just exploring that in this black and white painting. And then finally, last one that emerged in this series. Here we go. And started out with a big, I think I had a huge squeegee on this, moving these big movements. Here's a big movement. And again, exploring the horizontals, coming into a little bit of color, like here. Let's see if I can tilt that. In the pale green, you know, and some a little bit of pale green here, and a little bit of beige going on in there. So anyway, we'll see what happens with that. You know, just seeing that. And let's go ahead and take this board off, Grace. Just remove the board.
Mhm.
Oh,
Oh,
it
they're
didn't
stuck
catch.
together. Oh, it's-
Okay. Maybe we should just leave it up there.
Yeah, there's still, one of those clips is holding two boards.
No, it's not. Let's grab that piece of paper. Yeah, okay. Here we go. It's a lot of moving stuff around in here. All right. And let's bring this off. Big sheet of paper. There's a lot of orchestration today with all these boards and paints and so forth. And I don't know if you saw this yesterday or not, but basically the other thing is, again, I'm very excited by kind of spontaneous happenings, things that surprise you. And with those big ink paintings, some interesting things happen. And what happened is, remember these assemblage pieces, these starts that we talked about on the first day? Well, you know how the paint soaked through the back of the painting? Well, it hit some of these pieces, and it created these really interesting marks that I don't think I would have been able to create. It's just, they're very kind of velvety, unusual marks, okay? Surprising just from working with that. A little bit of the russet came through. I don't know if you can see that. Not so much as with the blue painting, but you see the blue showing up on these assemblage pieces. And that's the kind of thing that I think, you know, it's like allowing that is really, really exciting. So I submit to you to be open to these kinds of things occurring in your art. And that brings to mind to me Picasso. And there's a story that I think is really important with Picasso. Picasso's The Bull. I don't know if you've seen that or not. It's an 11 lithograph series where it actually is this amazing series, and it's so powerful. It's such a masterclass that the Apple University, which is a super secretive program at Apple, because they're all about creativity and innovation, they study Picasso's The Bull. And one day, it was a year ago or so, I don't know, we were over in San Francisco and we were at the De Young Museum, and we came around a corner and there it was. And I just gasped when I saw it, because I'd seen pictures of it, but to see it in person was amazing. And what Picasso did is he took the bull, very representational, bulked up bull, and he brought it down to increasing simplicity. He distilled it down with constraint. He simplified the elements and eventually brought it to a single line, and it's an absolute masterpiece. And it's such a study in continually evolving, and it's a study in working in series. Look at what Picasso did with his series there. Talk about evolution. And I think that's a fantastic way to get at that. And then yesterday we started to talk about Jon Utzon. And Jon Utzon, a Danish architect. I don't know if he's still alive today. I don't know.
I don't think so.
But we talked about evolving things, right? Okay, so there was a contest to design the Sydney Opera House. Okay, and he wanted to win that contest. And rather than kind of do what everybody else does, or rather than kind of repeat kind of what he's already done, right? Kind of variations on the theme of what's out there in architecture, much of which might be derived from and informed by the lineage of medieval cathedrals, which are absolutely fabulous and informed by the concept of a flying buttress.
Right, and those
Right?
were informed by Roman temples and public buildings.
Those were informed by Roman temples and public buildings, and they became integral to the design, right? And those are important concepts. But rather than just keep doing that and continue in that vein, he took a concept from nature, called monocoque. And it means single hull, single shell. It's a French word. And, like the perfect, monocoque, I think, is the egg. Think about an egg, the perfect shape. It's like seamless. It's all there. It's through composed. It's durchkomponiert. It's absolutely perfect. And monocoque has been used in the designs of hulls of boats and aircraft. Okay. And so this perfect seamless shape, well, he extrapolated from the concept of monocoque and brought it to his idea for the Sydney Opera House, and he won the prize. Talk about innovation. Talk about standing in his own 2 feet. Talk about thinking for himself. Okay. Talk about taking it to an edge. Talk about evolving architecture. He did. And it's now it's kind of one of the wonders of the world of architecture. And it's just a fabulous design. And a friend of mine actually emailed me gorgeous images of the Sydney Opera House yesterday. Because she lives around there and sees it at all hours of the day, and it's so amazing. So it's kind of like those kind of eggshell type shapes and sail type shapes of that design informed by monocoque. And that's really huge, is to bring in concepts like that and continually evolve. And so as artists, we want to be artists that continually evolve our art, okay? To not know ahead of time what we're going to do. And I love this quote from the artist Michael Cutlip. He's in Berkeley, California. And he says, when I go into my studio, if I know what's going to happen, it's all over. And I believe that. And, if we already know what it's about, forget it. Right? It's not going to be that exciting if it's already all laid out. We don't want to already know what's going to happen. We don't want to already know the answers. We want the mystery. We want to cultivate surprise. Okay. This is not about following formulas. We talked about that yesterday. And this is not about technique. And it's certainly not about art critique. This is about exploring Big Momma concepts in your art, extrapolating from science, nature, mathematics, poetry, music, yourself, you name it. This is about learning concepts from the intersection of art, science, evolutionary biology, poetry, creativity, psychology, mathematics, 0 to 1, nature, and applying it to our art and allowing our art to take us and others somewhere new. So speaking of taking action today, I'd love for you to leave a comment below. I know you have been, so I'll look at them in a minute. And tell me about your experience of working in a series, what you've noticed. How is that for you? Is that emerging for you? Is it something maybe you haven't done yet? I know for a long time I didn't realize the power of working in a series. And I've had other artists tell me that as well. So let me know about that. And in the next session tomorrow, session 4, we're going to kind of review some things. We're going to look at some big concepts again. And I'm going to show you some ways to implement what we've learned today in these last few days, making it easier and faster, hopefully with some ease and some joy and some flow to work through the struggles that can show up and get in there and find a few things that make a big difference in your art. And getting at that, whether you're at the beginning as an abstract artist or you've been doing this for years, okay? We want to get at the art that excites you. So whether you're in deep into it for years or you're just starting out, these foundational concepts are powerful, period. I've had very experienced artists say that the things that they've learned in the masterclass, they have not learned before in art school. We look at things in some unusual ways. So we want to get at and identify the few things that might be holding you back and open that up so you can create your deepest, most meaningful art and the art of your dreams. Number of you have been asking about the Studio Journey Masterclass. I'd love to see you in there. I'm going to be talking about that in more detail tomorrow. It's a fantastic course. It's amazing. We've got amazing artists in there, and it's all about stepping into it with an open mind and a heart that wants to learn and go into new territory. And we get amazing transformations. So, and frankly, results. So it's similar to a college class where we begin together, we go through it together, we're a group, we have calls, it's fantastic. And I'm in there, I go through it every single time. I go through the material and keep, evolving it, okay? So we're gonna start new class soon. So be on the lookout for that. And then we'll talk about that tomorrow. And in the next session, we'll just kind of keep moving forward and see how we can help you to keep going forward in your art. But for now, I want to give you a big congratulations for saying yes to being here, saying yes to your art, saying yes, moving off of no and moving into flow, saying yes to your art, trusting yourself enough to show up and start creating starts. Applying the concepts of experimentation and evolving your art to your art, opening it up, seeing the IC methodology, cutting through complexity and all that so that you can create astonishing art and move past not only emulating others, but moving past emulating yourself to going to someplace new and unknown. So if you want to do that with me and our group, then I can't wait to hear your thoughts about that. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. But meanwhile, I'd love to see your comments below. And yeah, I've been loving seeing you in here, seeing your comments and looking at them both here and at night when we take a break and get ready for the next day. So let me check in here. And I've seen a lot of people. Rod from Bozeman, Montana. Wow. Okay, let me scroll down here. All right. I'm seeing lots of lovely comments. Thank you. Suzanne says, amazing series so far. I love being able to be in the studio with you. Thank you to you and Bruce for the great presentation. Thank you so much, Suzanne. Jewel, wow, Nancy, amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Jewel. Thank you. Thank you for your lovely note too yesterday. Haza says the replays are available. Here, she's got it. She's got the link. Arundhati says, thank you so much, Nancy. I missed a lot, but hope to listen to the recording. Yeah, you can catch it. Don't worry about it. Oh, thanks. I'm Conway from India. Thanks so much for an amazing session. Thank you. Wow. Ian, thanks, Nancy and Bruce. Inspiring as always. See you tomorrow. Bye. Thanks, Ian. See you tomorrow too. That's great. Oh, wow. Great session. Yay. Linda says masterclass is terrific. Yay. It is. And the artists and their just so wonderful, kind, fabulous artists and fabulous people. So it's really great. Carol, hey Carol, awesome. Thank you for all this amazing information and exploration. Thank you so much, Carol. Great to see you. Rod says, thanks. This is so inspiring. Hope I can take the masterclass someday. I hope so too, Rod. You got to get in there and join us. Dee, oh, thanks, Dee. I see Dee in here. I know, Dee, you've been in here every day. Thank you so much. Dee is amazing, an amazing, amazing artist. And Dee's work is going to be in the next book. I got another book coming out. It's going to be very exciting, but we'll talk about that at another time. I love that. Mary, Studio Journey Masterclass is amazeballs. I highly recommend it. I love that. Amazeballs. That's so great. Dawn says, thanks very much, Nancy. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah. Janice, thank you, Nancy. You really are the dynamic duo. Oh, yeah. We have so much fun. I don't know where Bruce is right now, but he was here a second ago. Oh, he's laughing in the background. Eugenia says, this has been it's been so inspiring. Thank you, Nancy and Bruce. Thank you, Eugenia. Okay. Dale says, thank you. This lesson was very interesting. Great. I'm so happy to hear that, Dale. Peg, thank you so very, very much. I'm going to work in a series right now. Yes. Way to go, Peg. Jennifer says, I love the idea of working a series. Yes. Yes, it's so good. Barbara says, never worked in a series. It's a great time to start, Barbara. All right. Okay, Joan Langfeld said, what was Michael's last name from Berkeley? Cutlip, Cutlip. He does fabulous collages. Oh, he's fabulous. Diane, hey Diane. I love this, Nancy. Thanks, Nancy and Bruce. Thank you, Diane, and thank you for your lovely notes. I know you wrote on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. It's always great to see you. All right. Claire says, thanks for the link. Oh, another cave painting, a thread for the class. Yes. Karin, sorry, Karin. That's right. Elizabeth had to leave this wonderful, interesting workshop. Thank you so much, Nancy and Bruce and Mary. Hope to be able to catch up with the registration. Fantastic, Elizabeth. The bull, yeah, and Mary. Elizabeth Cassidy says, I have Picasso's bull on my wall. I bet it was amazing to see it in person. It was. If you ever get a chance, go for it. Go for it. Karen Kane, I love this, Nancy. It's so good to be able to be in a workshop with you. I was working on a piece as you were speaking. Hey, Karen, great to see you. That's great. All right. Yeah, I'm just kind of scrolling around. So. Oh, Dee says Nancy plays cello too. Yeah. Yeah, I do it for fun. Let's see. Okay, Susan Rubenstein says, what drawing painting tools does Nancy use to make the white and black lines in those black paintings? Well, sometimes it's, I pour ink, basically. Ink, and sometimes I'll use acrylic paint. And sometimes I'll use just various markers, you know what I mean? Like pencils and things like that.
Hey, Nancy, I sent you the questions.
Laura Lee says, I see faces on that last piece. Yeah, you know what? I painted figures for so long. I see lots of figures in my paintings.
Hey, Nancy, can you hear me?
Michelle says that too. Yep. Diane says this series is very musical. Yeah. It is, isn't it? It's kind of like the staff, the clef and the staff and all that, the musical. And okay, Zoe says, if you were to show these paintings, how would you present them? That's a very good question. So, well, there's different ways of going. Now, one way I might go is one thing I've done before that I really like is wet mounting. I have my framer do that. And basically they take the painting, they attach the back of it with archival glue to a foam core board, acid-free foam core board, about 1/2 inch, flat and straight to the edges, flatten it out, okay? Then they drop that in a floater frame. And this is a reversible process. Now, if you do dry mounting, they do a similar thing, except they use heat. And the problem with that is using heat with an acrylic polymer is it's got some toxicity and it's not reversible. Although I've got friends who love the dry mounting. So that's one way to go, okay? Another way would be something akin to the Paper Giants exhibit that went around about 3 years ago in museums. And basically it was 3 artists. They had big paper paintings of the same size and they hung them from the top with magnets or pins and then let the bottom drop and there was no framing. And that's happening in various also galleries in New York. And it kind of affords a certain kind of accessibility. And that's another way of going that you can do. So one way or the other, anyway. Sue asked, is the white that I use gesso? No, it is not. I use white inks, I use white acrylics, but I don't use much gesso. Although I did use black gesso for the black paintings. Okay. Anyway, yeah, lots of things. Jan says the close-ups show many beautiful paintings within the larger one. Oh, wow. Rod says, I recently had a near-death experience and the black on black totally reminds me of the walls of the tunnel before the light. Beautiful. Wow, Rod. Wow. That's the kind of thing. See, art can move us and really take us somewhere, so into experiences and reflect too experiences like that. That might be something to explore, Rod, if you want. Yeah. So let me go down to the bottom. I was kind of getting up near the top. Okay. Haza says there's over here in Messenger. She's got some questions for me. So hold on. Susan asked a question for the end. What do you think of the artistic value of an art degree in retirement to help solidify a foundation and principles to build upon? Well, it all depends on what you want to do. I mean, I looked at that at one point. This is a long time. This is like, hold on a second. Uh-oh, I got to bring it up again. Okay, just a second. That, I mean, if that's what you want to do, you could do that. You know, it really just depends upon you, Susan. You know, if you want to kind of go into a program and all that, I can tell you that the studio during MASTERCLASS, many people have said is better than going to art school. Because we're getting at foundational principles, many of which are not talked about in art school, because they're not really talking about the adjacent possible or evolutionary biology or mathematics and that sort of thing. That said, I mean, if you want to go to art school, go for it. You might run into art critique, but you might not. It just depends upon where you go. And again, like I said, I'm not a fan of that. So I'm not particularly drawn to art schools because of that. But again, that's up to you. Whatever you want to do. Okay, just a second. Let me see what else is going on. Hold on. Oh, okay. Eugenia says, when you are working in a series, do you start all at once, or how do you face the process? Well, I just start, okay? Just like I had this board, and I was like, oh wow, and I had this idea, okay, and I go in, I create a painting, right? And it might be a start, or it might be like, wow, suddenly there's this painting, and that's what happened. And then what happened, and I might just stop there, okay? That might be a one-off mutation. I may not go any further. On the other hand, I was so intrigued with that, I thought, well, let's explore it further. And now I'm in a series, because then I moved in further, because as I created that one painting, it asked me to go further. You know what I mean? It was pushing, something was pushing to keep going. And I just keep going, as something pops through. And it might be, a series might be 2 paintings, it might be 100, it could be 1,000. Or it might be like 3, 5, 20, whatever. It's like, it's when it keeps speaking. And sometimes I'll have a series and it lives for a while, and then I'll go back into it, because I'll look at it and go, wow, I want to, something pops through to go further. It's asking something of me. So it really depends. Okay. Okay. And multiple artists ask about this. What is flux? Okay, so if you're asking that, you missed our talk yesterday when I was doing the demo. So let me talk about flux for a moment here. So flux, really comes from the idea, a big idea of the life, death, life cycle in nature. Okay, so we're constantly in flux, and nature is constantly in flux, and life is in flux. Our bodies are not static. They're in flux. They're continually evolving. Okay. They're continually changing. Okay. Our neural networks don't stay the same. If you start painting a lot, it affects your neural network. If you start playing the cello, it affects your neural network. If you start riding horses, it affects anything you do. It's continually changing. It's not set in stone. And in contradistinction to what we learned in medical school back in the 80s, which said that by 25, all your neurons are there, not true. You see, knowledge is continually changing. What we've learned is that your brain is continually changing. Neurogenesis is happening. That is the emergence of new networks and neurons. Okay, you're continually changing. It's not all over at 25. So we can extrapolate from this concept. I mean, our GI tract, our cells are turning over, our skin cells are turning over, right? All these things, we know this. We're aging, right? If we look at a tree and we look at the springtime, it's like a little baby. It's emerging. The little buds are coming forth. It's coming into life, right? It's emerging new life. And then, we move along and it's becoming more in life, and it's in the summer of its life, and, that particular season. And maybe that's like childhood or teenagerhood or whatever. And we start to move into the fall. Now we're into adulthood. And pretty soon those leaves are starting to dry and they're starting to drop. And we're starting to kind of fall away. And that could be the veiling, okay, where we veil with translucent paint, but we don't quite totally cover it up, okay? And then we move into the winter, which is akin to death, where the leaves are gone and things are quite still. And that might be the covering. It's going away. It's gone. But then it comes back in the spring. And that's the cycle, the life, death, life cycle that continues. We could take that big concept and bring it into our art, where we activate the canvas. That's the emergence, that's the life, that's the springtime. And then we can start to let some of them start to fall away, start to disappear, but not completely. And that's the veiling. That's kind of the fall. And then other marks we make, we just obliterate. We move them out. We cover them up. And that's the winter. But then we might decide I'm going to go back in and activate again. And that's the spring. That's the life again. And this is the dance. Okay, this is the dance. And we can bring that to our art. And so you can look at, I talked about that yesterday for sure. You can look at that in that replay. Okay, so more details on that. So I hope that's helpful. Let me just see what else. Hold on just a second. From Stephanie, I love this. Is there a rule as to which tools you should use to paint with? I'm rebelling against the paintbrushes at the moment. You should join us in the Academy des Refusés, the Salon des Refusés we talked about yesterday. Oh, wow, I love that. No, there are no rules. You are the artist, the composer, and you decide, okay? You're the author of the work. I love that you're rebelling. You're noticing you don't want to use paintbrushes. You don't need to use paintbrushes. You can use whatever you want. You can use your hands. You might want to use gloves if you use your hands, but you know, in terms of toxicity, but whatever. Yeah, and just knock out that word should. Because should is like a word that means somebody's writing the menu here, and it's probably not you. So knock it out. Don't worry about should. You decide. You're the artist. I love that. I love that. Stephanie. Hosna said, multiple artists asked, what kind of clips do you use to hold up your art? Yay, that's a great question. Hold on, Bruce. Can we figure out the name of that? I love these clips. Let me see if it's on here. Is it Wolfcraft? Here it is. It's called Wolf. Yeah, Wolfcraft. 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 And what happens is it comes in a package. You can get it from your hardware store. You can get it online, and it comes with like 3 different ones. Okay. And it's got these different types. And typically I think there's like 8 or 10 or something it's on a piece of cardboard. You get a bunch of them. And these are so good. I love these. So I highly recommend those. Okay, let's see what else we got. Okay, just a second. Okay. Then, okay, Pretty says, thanks, Nancy. Can you please talk a bit more about the adjacent possible? Yes. So let's bring Bruce in here too. Okay, Bruce, can you walk past? We got paintings everywhere. This has been kind of an orchestration. By the way, Pretty, you might want to get this book, The Adjacent Possible, because it's all in here. And we got another one coming that's going to further talk about it with stories, but this is a really, really good book. So The Adjacent Possible came out of discussions at the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the 90s with Bruce Sawhill, my beloved Bruce Sawhill, Dr. Bruce Sawhill, who's a physicist and mathematician, musician, and composer, and very creative, artist in his own right. And he got very interested in systems and biology and complexity and all these things. And he and Stuart Kaufman and a number of other scientists started exploring this concept of the adjacent possible in evolutionary biology. And we're extrapolating it to abstract painting. So maybe Bruce can describe this, and we can also talk about that in relationship to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So go ahead.
Well, at least the first part. The biological inspiration is from evolution, that you have new things showing up in a system that weren't there before. And how does biology explore? Well, it's living in an environment that is created from that exists independent of the life that's in it. And then it's an environment created, modified by the life that's there. And so in reaction to this combination of environmental influences, biology keeps doing new experiments, trying new creatures. And it can happen in multiple ways. Either the ones that exist can move around, which happens in ecology, or they can create new ones. And nature's completely doing experiments. And what has evolved is that generally new creatures that show up are fairly closely related to ones that were there before. They're adjacent. They have most of the same genetic material and a few modifications.
This is like a series
Yes,
in
it's
painting.
like a series that nature is continuously painting series.
Mhm, mhm.
And that gives the experiments a higher chance of success.
So we're extrapolating this big concept to bring it into abstract art in stepping into the unknown in that adjacency. You've made a move. Maybe you made a move, maybe you created a painting, and then that like informs something new emerging that wouldn't not only have been there before, but didn't exist at all. You couldn't maybe even have imagined it, but it emerges. So I think that is a key piece. And if you want to learn more, go to our, get the book, go over to our blog at artistjourney.com. You'll see that we write extensively about the adjacent possible and poised instability and experimentation and evolving your art. And so I think that would be helpful. Okay, let me see if there's anything else. Hold on just a second. Oh, Sarah says, what kind of board is the one I use? Okay, this board is a birch plywood board, and it is 48 inches by 60 inches. That's 4 feet by 6 feet.
5 feet.
5 feet, sorry, meters, I don't know. But we're still over here in inches and foot.
1.3 by 1.6, right?
Bruce says about 1.3 by 1.6 meters. So half inch thick. It's pretty heavy, but it's strong. And I have 2 of those just because they're so heavy and unwieldy. I'd have more, but I move them on and off of this Klopfenstein easel. It's a metal easel. It's heavy duty and it's powerful. So hope that helps. See if there's anything else. I think we've covered it. I think we're good. And appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Jump in here tomorrow. We've got more to come. We've got some exciting things to talk about in terms of big concepts and to tell you about the masterclass so you can learn more about that. This is fantastic. I appreciate you and I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you tomorrow. See you back here. Bye. Thanks, everybody. I'm seeing your thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Molly. Thanks, Diana.